So, welcome to CxXchange Success Hour. I am excited to kick off January 2025. Exciting new year. This quarter, we're moving to monthly, and we are also going to be discussing AI and how to use it in your CS program. We're sort of extending our series that we were talking about in December, but we really want to make certain that we're hands-on and getting you engaged and getting you to incorporate AI in your programs. So 6 fundamentals you need before you implement AI. This is something that Shawn Stiffler and I feel quite passionate about. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Shawn can introduce himself for any who have not met him before. He's joined us a few times. Shawn, say a
Thank you,
little
Jen.
about
Good
yourself.
morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Shawn Stiffler, Director of Operations, Account Management and Success at Dr. Genius. So most things post-sale. And we serve the private practice healthcare segment and primarily the SMB market. I've been with them for 10 years. And of my day-to-day, I primarily focus most of my attention on success and account management, and inevitably AI has hit those areas, and we have a lot of ongoing projects, and this is a very appropriate topic to talk about.
Hey, all right. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to go through a couple slides. Then we'll go to breakouts to discuss and then come back. If you do have questions or thoughts, feel free to raise your hand, but do you want to, we always like to have a proactive, engaging, interactive discussion here. But I will keep my eye on the time. So, all right. So CS leaders, this is kind of your page. And then we have one that's a little bit more focused for CSMs. But going back to, I forgot to share the link to the slides. So let me get you the link to the slides. Shawn, can you do that while I'm doing this? All right, awesome.
Got it.
Okay, so that way you can download these, and we do have some resources and things like that. So I mean, we would be remiss if we didn't first talk about data. But Shawn, before we started, you were mentioning is it 70% of all projects fail? Is that what you were saying?
That's the current stat.
Yeah. And so whether you're implementing anything you're implementing in your CS program, if you're not setting yourself up for success, you are setting yourself up for failure, right? So that's why it's important to pay attention to these sort of things. And so when you're looking at your data, besides thinking about like, is your data clean, think about also your connectors, because basically, if you think about every tool you're using, whether you have a CRM or if you have a CS platform, or all of the data that is associated with your product, you have a number of different places. Support has its own set of data. All these places are basically silos of data. There's something called a unique identifier, and if your company has thought about this ahead of time, every single one of your silos of data has a consistent unique identifier amongst them. Now, as a consultant, I can tell you most places forget this step. But there's still, because of AI and other ways of matching data, there's still ways in which you can match your data. Sometimes it's by looking at the records and thinking about like what the email login is, right? Because it has a unique identifier of their platform, of their company, right? But then if there's parent companies and things like that, it can still get a little messy. So think about then how you can try to match your data and match your customers' information across all these silos. And then if you can match most of it, like 95% of it, then you can get down to the 5% that is, that you need to work through. but there's things like that. You want to also think about the data that is important for the outcomes you need. If you organize it around what you actually need, because let's be clear, not all of your data is going to be clean, right? There's going to be missing information or old information that happens. But is it something you need to really focus your time on cleaning if it's not critical data, right? So think about what outcomes you need and what is the most important part of your data that you need to clean up. And then if you do, turn it into a mini project and get it done. Get it done before you start to implement tools and all of the data in your AI program or something like that becomes useless, essentially, or like erroneous and not helpful, and then people lose faith in the tool or the information that they're getting, right? Now, Matthew Lind, I see you, and I know that you've implemented a number of projects like this, so feel free to weigh in as well. But and then thinking too about the process and how are you going to discover if something is missing or incorrect, and coming up with ways to do that. Shawn, did you have some thoughts you wanted to share on these topics?
Yes, especially data process for catching what's missing. We have embarked on that over the last year within Salesforce, as that's where we pull the majority of our data. And we've run into problems before when you go to embark on whether it's an AI project or something else, and you're missing data you didn't know it's critical. Who was watching it, what happened, and no one was watching it, and you don't really know what happened other than it just wasn't entered. I've had data overwritten before from software updates for one reason or another in fields. And now for processes that we have that capture missing fields that are critical, it's surfaced immediately if something goes wrong, or human error too. And that's very important to have in place.
Yeah. Matthew, was there something you wanted to add?
I just gonna high five Sean on all of that. It's like having some sort of mechanism to know that you're still operational. Because sometimes I think, and Sean, you said this, but it's you think something's running, everybody thinks that this feed is coming in, and then suddenly you find out it's not, but everyone was acting like it was and making decisions like it was. So that's the key, is like having some sort of monitoring process to
Yeah.
ensure that what you think is running is really running.
Yeah. Yeah, and Tracy, I think, did we answer your question in the chat in terms of monitoring the data? I mean, sometimes it's, developing a report that you can run to see where there's blanks. Sometimes you can divide and conquer and have your CSM team who's responsible for parts of their data to go and look through things and see if the information that's in their head has been translated correctly into, is really there, that kind of stuff. It just varies. Okay, good. Okay, now another thing is, anytime you start to slice and dice your data, the first thing that I have folks do is go through and first get their data ducks in a row on an account level. Once you have your account information, revenue, costs, tickets, types of tickets and severity, engagement, key things that you need to know about your customers. If you have that on an account level, and when their original contract date was, when their current contract date started, when it ends, if there's any triggers in it, if you have all of that type of data, right, on an account level, then when you start to slice and dice your data, you can start to figure out what your segments and tiers ought to be. You can start to look at what's happening with your revenue, with your profits, with your margins, with your profitability. You can look at your most profitable, least profitable, profitability by segment, profitability by tiers. And what I mean by segment versus tier is how much money they're paying you, what they mean to you. Segments are what are the buckets of behavior that you might group your customers into. So if they're all in media, and let's say you have media and medical and IT as customers for your whatever your product is, and they're using different parts of your product and they have different end goals and different nomenclature that they're using, then basically you would put them into 3 different buckets. But otherwise, if say they're enterprise or mid-market or SMB, then the way that how much time you're going to spend on them, that sort of thing, what sort of tiers they have, might be more similar in terms of across the tiers, right? So you can kind of think of it as a grid in that way. You want to understand the journey, right? And you want to think about what are the stages that they're going through in that life cycle. And then within that, what are the key milestone events and outcomes within each stage? And once you've identified those things, then you have that critical path. And when you have that critical path, then you have the activities that they should be doing and by when, then you know what sort of conversion rates, or you should be measuring the conversion rates. How many of your customers achieved what by when, right? All of these kinds of things, you want to have the data for this. And then when you are analyzing it if you're doing it via reports, or once you start to implement AI, you can start to look at these trends in a more informative and informed way, right? But if you don't have that data on an account level basis, then you can't decide like, oh, geez, I thought that all these folks had, were a bucket, but, my medical and media, verticals are using the products in exactly the same way, other than using different nomenclature. They're the same bucket, like it could be, but you only get that information once you start to collect this type of data, and you can start to analyze those things and slice and dice it in different ways. Anything you want to add to that, Shawn, before I know you want to introduce the concept of muda, which I love?
Yeah, you covered it pretty thoroughly. The critical path point, how many of us have went to deploy a project and it's deployed, or you meet the end and it's defined as done and you didn't reach your goal, or something didn't happen as expected, and it's largely due because you aimed at the wrong target, or you didn't have complete information to make the decision, and or maybe you're targeting a part of the customer journey or whatever journey that can happen perhaps concurrently or out of order. Does it need to be sequential versus targeting something that really has to happen at a certain time in a certain order? And you may end up exacerbating the problem rather than helping. So critical path is an important concept.
Mm-hmm. And share muda as well.
So muda, Japanese term, so it's waste. So you want to remove muda. And so this is before AI. Like deploying AI is to solve some problem. That's where that usually comes from. So earn more money, become more efficient, and then some other examples. But before that, are you just deploying AI into a system that has a ton of waste? And if in their processes and their motions and how things are done, then that's also just not going to help. And that would end up in the 70% failure bucket more than likely for a project. So you can achieve incredible efficiencies by removing waste well before deploying any AI, but do that first. And then once you deploy AI, you'll be very successful or have a higher probability of being successful.
And this is key anytime you're scaling any sort of CS program, is you want to think about what are the critical things, the critical path, the key things you should be prioritizing that are leading to the outcomes that you need, whether it's a revenue event on our side or a business outcome on the customer side, right? And then any of these other extraneous things, if it's not really necessary, if it's not moving the needle or having impact, do you really need to spend time doing it? And is it something, just because you've always done it, kick the tires on it? Do you really need to? Because first of all, you don't have the capacity of your team to be doing extraneous things. But also, if you spend a bunch of time scaling something that has no impact, then you've wasted all that time to scale something that isn't efficient as well, right? That doesn't have impact. So this is a key concept for scaling as well. And then the last thing is all, and you've already sort of heard me sort of mention it when I talked about these revenue events, is you want to understand your business objectives, right? You want to be sure that you are aligning to your business objectives. This depends upon what kinds of what stage your business is in, what goals your investors and the executive team has, and making certain that you're connecting to that. If the key thing that they're focused on is retention, and you're not building in activities that lead to that, right? Then you're not going to be aligned with that. If what they're focused on is more around expansion, then you need to think about, like, have you set up activities around that? If there's some other sort of business objective, I'm not sure what else there would be around other than money, frankly, because those are the first things. But you want to be sure that you are aligned with those business objectives, right? And whether you're managing your goals up to that, or if you're thinking about your what I call customer economics, the account level revenue and costs, or if you're thinking about and this is something, if you can go back to past sessions that even Shawn and I have done, and this is oh, I think I have the book even right here. Oh, I'm going to bring the book up, but I always bring up the expansion sale, which when you're looking at earning the right to sell to your customers, right? Then you're thinking about are they ready to actually purchase the renewal, or purchase whatever product you're trying to buy them. What have you delivered to them in those outcomes that makes them ready to do that? And what signals do you have in your product that you are tracking, that you would be able to identify these kinds of things? Does that make sense? Are there questions? Anybody want to add thoughts to that? Shawn? Anybody?
Covered it. Got to tie it to the business objectives, or it'll be viewed as a failure. Or it may just be a failure. Yeah.
Like, I know somebody who was building out a whole series of webinars and advocacy with the customers and that sort of thing, but they hadn't tied it to a business objective. And so the executive team didn't care. And they put all this work into it, and they were building these customer advocates, and it was just like, so what, according to the executives, right? And they were like, do we really need to do this? And so think about, even if you're building advocate programs or whatever, how does it lead back into any of the business objectives? Otherwise, it's a nice to have, and they don't care. All right. And all right, do you want, the critical path journey? Why don't you kick this off, Shawn?
Yes. So critical path we covered briefly, but just to help CSMs and individual contributors managing up to and just to stand out is the reason behind this slide, is to provide some insight here. So we're deploying an AI tool or something hits your queue. Where you can really help is what actually needs to happen. So there's an idea of what executives or managers or leaders may think needs to happen, and then there's what really happens, and oftentimes they're not aligned. Or you have your ideal published customer journey, but okay, what's actually happening? And you'll see a lot of posts on LinkedIn about that too. But being able to provide that information and insight is super helpful and can drive where an AI implementation or other projects go, and it can help make it successful. And then key activities to focus on. Jan covered a little earlier. Is something really critical or not? Is it important to focus on? And that's super valuable to provide that insight to leadership teams. Customer indicators will be ingested for AI depending on what the goal is. If the business objective is usage adoption of some feature leads to expansion, then you need to track that, and you could kind of circle back to where's your data, how is it collected, how is it verified, but also what needs to happen. Because CSM's on the front lines, you will know better than anybody, and providing that information is very helpful. and then how to engage, how do they prefer to be engaged with, when, and at what point in time in the journey. So those things are really important, and it helps tremendously. One of the biggest takeaways I hope anyone has, especially at the CSM, team lead, individual contributor level, and leadership for that matter, is just ask why. Many of us may experience, oftentimes there's not an answer for why someone may want to do something. And that opens up a really good conversation of digging deeper. So what is it that we really want to solve? And that will just increase the probability of success. And also you will continue to help your organization and your team be successful. So we covered the projects fail. In my experience, almost unanimously, it's just, there's no why asked. There's no digging deeper. It's just, marching in some direction, and you could really miss your target. Okay,
And
so
can I just add in something here too? For all of these things, if there is a way for you to systematically track, as CSMs, track these things, either in whatever systems you have on hand in your companies, or if you're tracking these things just in a spreadsheet, if you share that with your managers so that they can see what you are tracking, right? That you're trying to get it out of your head and have a way of looking at this information in a systematic way. Not only will you get credit for it and that sort of thing, but also then that will spur them on to think about how they're setting you up for success when they're setting up these new systems, when they're setting up systems that are, incorporating AI and things like that. Just want to sort of spur ideas. Sorry to interrupt you, Shawn.
no, Patty, you're correct. That's where the why point came from. 5 whys, super helpful. And you may be surprised that oftentimes there's usually not an answer behind the what, and so you'll stand out. So what do we wish to accomplish, and then drilling down into that, kind of circling back to where's the data stored. Usually you need to call on data. If we're talking about AI, it needs to consume something. And now aligning to business objectives. So deploying AI is usually it's revenue based, save money, become more efficient, but you could work that down to revenue as well, and margins. Maybe to expand accounts. We have some examples here. So, okay, how would we expand accounts with AI? What do we want to do? So maybe your solution streamlines supply chains for your customers, and that if your value prop is you'll improve lead times by 40%, maybe for some product or some part of their supply chain, which on average improves margin by 15%. Great. How do you track any of that? How do you verify any of that? What needs to happen? What milestones need to happen? All of that, all this rolls right back up to getting that information, digging deeper, and then deploying some solution. It could be your solution is one feature. Your business strategy for your customers is to expand, land and expand, as we probably are familiar with. And for certain one feature usually leads to others, and that's why your customers come to you. Again, where do you track that? What needs to happen? Can you get ahead of certain potential issues and positive indicators, and operate in that way and deploy AI and be successful? And then stabilizing, maybe your solution just helps perhaps revenue cycle management, revenue collection, and you flatten peaks and valleys for your customers. So it's a more consistent cash flow. Great. So what does that mean? How does that happen? How long do they need to be engaged with your product for that to happen? And many other questions. Where is that stored? How is it stored? How is it verified? And then deploy AI, and you will likely be successful. As a frontline contributor, you will really stand out remembering to do these things, because there's also many on leadership teams that don't do this. And so you will really help your company, help yourself, but you'll help your teams as well become more successful. So, Jan, I don't know if you wanted to add any to that, but not just driving forward in some direction, but really sharing your knowledge and expertise on your customers goes a long way.
And well, I guess what I would say is sometimes who you're working with as a CSM, they don't know the why, right? And so you might need to then think about and help them think about, well, what are the key things you're trying to achieve this quarter? You know, what are your KPIs? Help them connect it back to, you know, what are your business, you know, objective, you know, what is the business talking about trying to achieve this quarter? What is your manager trying to talk about, you know, achieving this quarter, right? Helping them walk through, because then that's going to give you some insights, right? You know, how are you going to use this product in, you know, whatever way, right? So if you're looking at this type of information, then where are you going to store it? And I'm curious if there's anything from CSMs right now that are here in today. Have you been trying to keep this type of information already? Do you have places either in spreadsheets or in your tools that you're already trying to keep this information, or is it pretty much in your head? Any CSMs want to jump in on that? Hey, Gul.
Yeah, so I can contribute to this.
Oh, you're on mute now.
There you go. Yeah, so I can contribute to this. In my new job, we are using Salesforce and Catalyst, and I found, wow, that is very helpful, like the tracking the information, the performance of the customer on the platform, and the tracking the financial. But my problem is sometimes that I cannot directly connect a feature to the dollar value for the customer in my EBRs to say, hey, you remember you didn't use this feature since you added this. And specifically, I'm in the digital credentialing. So how can I know exactly how much they added to the revenue by implementing this feature or using this platform? This is hard. And then I discussed with my managers. They can guess, but even that is not 100% true.
Right. Yeah, especially because you're not kind of in their records. I think that really comes into having conversations with the customers and saying, well, tell me, you know, where first of all, you always want to bring something to it, right? In any of those conversations. So if you have other customers who are in that industry and you are have some insights that then they're going to be interested in, you know, that's something you can bring to them, but then say, so how is that working for you? And how, you know, and really just start to understand more about the impact. It's also helpful to know, is your product business critical or business nice to have? Because if it's business nice to have, it may or may not be saving them time or money, right? As opposed to critical. So things like that can also help you understand. But and not always. Sometimes you can, you know, the other thing too is if you're saving them time, and then if you're saving them time, and then you say, oh, did it save you any meeting time? Did you have fewer meetings? How many people would you typically have in those meetings? You know, who is usually in those meetings? Then if nothing else, you can go out, get some market averages of those types of, you know, oh, there would have been an engineer and, you know, whatever, different people who are in those meetings, and it saved 3 of those meetings a month. And then you can kind of come up to and say, on average, this is what it might look like. It might be different for you, right? So at least then you can start to find some ways to guesstimates.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So that's basically what we had for our overall topics here to cover. And then what we thought it might be useful is to discuss what sort of outcomes, because without knowing the outcomes that you want to achieve and connecting whatever projects you have to outcomes, then your project is going to be in that 70% unsuccessful as opposed to 30% successful, right? And thinking about what is your critical path. This is helpful whether you're a CSM or a CS leader. And also thinking about tracking your customer financials, what sort of time you're putting into it, what the cost is, as well as what your revenue is, right? So those are the questions we were thinking of for the breakouts. And also, oh, one other thing I should just share with you real quick is we do have some additional resources, different books and newsletters that you might be interested in. And then let me go ahead. We'll go to the breakouts for 15 minutes. So I'll make the breakout rooms kind of small. And I will see you all in 15 minutes. I love seeing the microphone things that are going on in the rooms and how everyone stays to the last second and then they come back. It's great to see those conversations going. What kinds of insights, is there something that's a takeaway for you today from this discussion?
Clean data. That's the first step.
Clean data. Yeah. And people think like, oh, how can I do it? But break it into chunks. Think about what's the most important data to get clean first and break it into doable chunks. That's the first thing you do is just break it into parts and then you can get it done. If you think of it as like, how will I clean everything? Well, it's like, if you have a really messy house, you just start one room at a time, one closet at a time, whatever it may be.
Hire students for a cheaper option.
What was that?
Hire students, like a student co-ops. So for cheaper, instead of you spending your expensive time on it, to hire.
Sure, yeah. If there's data that just needs to be, that can be cleaned in a more task-oriented way. But also think about how can you get the data that's inside people's heads? Is there some way, whether it's through the AI conversations that are captured that can be brought in, or if there's other ways you might do it, right? Like think about that. What other things came up? Something?
Don't trust that the AI is always correct.
Yep. And there are lots of ways in which, especially with Gen AI, to make it more accurate versus creative, as well as training an LLM on your data or restricting it to your data, right? That can make it more likely to be accurate. And then there's other types of processes that don't have that creative nature the way that generative AI does, right? So it's not like all AI is going to be erroneous. Any other thoughts as we have one last minute to go? Something to leave folks with?
Yeah, I just want, hi Jen, hello everyone. I just want to add that AI is really very, very helpful, and we have to learn how to use it in order to cover our data and have analysis and to help us to make different approaches to different customers. And as you mentioned, if we have some segmentation, we can have all the data according to this segmentation. So we have to learn and to be friends with AI, I would say.
Yeah, it's going to change how we work, and it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
a lot of different ways. So yeah, find a way to become friends with it. Certainly, that's great advice, Olha, and a great way to end it. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions, and Shawn for this nugget of an idea that was just, I felt like a great way to start 2025. And anything you want to say, Shawn?
I appreciate you having me as always, and meeting some new faces here and recognizing some old faces as well. So let's kick off our week for us on the West Coast. I'm going to get to some client stuff, and good afternoon, good night to those in different time zones.
Yeah. Great to see everybody.
Right.
We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.